Assalamu alaikum. We're really honored and this cold night, also warmed by having you all here. And inshallah we begin with a dua that Allah gives us beneficial knowledge. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على مولانا محمد وعلى آله في كل لمحة ونفس عدد ما وسعه علم الله. يا عليم علمنا من علمك ما ترضى به عنا ولا تؤاخذنا بما تعلمه منا. يا حليم خلقنا بخلق الحلم وحققنا بحقائق العلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik wa sallam alayhi. Is my mic working? Okay, I wasn't holding it well enough. My name is Banu, and I am going to be doing very little this evening, but facilitating the session, inshallah. For those of you who haven't joined us for an in-conversation session before, I'll just tell you a little bit about how the session will run in terms of format, and then I'm going to hand over to our panelists. The idea of this evening is that we have a conversation with Dr. Umar, that we go through the paper that Dr. Umar has written, and we engage with it, and we have a dialogue. So really, this evening is as much about yourselves as it is about the panel. So please do take advantage of that, inshallah. We have in front of us a panel of regular hub goers. To my right is Sister Rhoda, who will be providing a summary of the maxim that goes along, that Dr. Umar recommended we read alongside the paper. And to her right is Sister Sadia, who will be asking some pre-prepared questions that she's put together, having read the paper, inshallah. To Shah Faraz's left is Sidi Ridwan, who will be doing some asking some pre-prepared questions from the brother's perspective, and to his left is Sidi Kamran, who will be kicking off the evening by providing us a summary of the paper. So for those of you who haven't read the paper, like last week, we're being nice to you and we're providing you a summary. But the real idea is hopefully that most of you will have read the paper and will have engaged with it prior to coming here. We already have some questions that some of you have emailed in, so we will ensure that those get asked, inshallah. So what will happen is those who are providing the summary will do that. Dr. Umar will then comment on the summary that has been provided and give you a very brief perspective on the paper as well. We will then go to the question of the panelists to open up the questions, and once that has happened, we will open it up to the floor, inshallah, and to those brothers and sisters who are joining us online for us to ask questions of Dr. Umar and to start really engaging with the debate, inshallah. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sidi Kamran and ask him to provide us with a summary, please. Jazakallah.
Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
We need microphones.
Okay. All right.
You have to switch on to
Make sure to hold it close to your mouth.
Okay, can everybody hear me? All right. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa man wala. Wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So this is an article that I remember reading, and I'm sure many of you remember reading years ago, and it's been something that I know quite a few of us here in Toronto have used as kind of as our guide to moving forward and trying to make sense of how we're going to fuse our own understanding of what it means, what Canadian culture means, with our religious understandings of Islam, with traditional Islam. So Dr. Umar in this article, he begins by saying, that Islam, has a history of fusing the deep-rooted faith with indigenous cultures, wherever they've gone. That whether they were in China, West Africa, wherever they went, that Muslims preserved the sanctity and the sacredness of the culture itself, as well as bringing into it the religious understandings of the faith itself. The example that Dr. Umar continuously gives is that the word when in Chinese, there's no word like Islam or Islaha, like in Chinese, but rather that they had come up with their own culturally sensitive term for Islam, being those who I had it here. Sorry, Dr. Umar, what was it?
It's Qing Zhen Jiao, the religion of the real and the pure.
That's right. So that notion, that concept of bringing into a culture, the history and the sanctity of the culture, maintaining that while also infusing Islamic values. So, and the article goes on to say that something happened, like culture evolves as it goes on through history. Human beings, by their nature, evolve culture and they continuously grow culture. But something happened when Muslims migrated to America, to Canada, that evolution seems to have stopped, and that that cultural baggage that was to be checked at the door came with them, and that our mosques, for instance, the way they're being run oftentimes has more to do with the culture of the old country as opposed to the culture of the native Canadians or Americans, to have democratic elections, to have a sense of understanding with the larger community, with injecting ourselves into the larger community. And then in the prophetic tradition, even during the times of the Prophet ﷺ, and Dr. Umar goes on to mention the sons of Arfida, that there were these I believe they were from Africa. They had come and they wanted to beat their leather drums, in a celebration, a religious celebration. And Umar, radiallahu anh, he tried to stop them, and the Prophet said, no, they are the sons of Arfida, like to say, let them celebrate. They came out with their spears and they wanted to do a dance and celebrate. And even to the point where the Prophet ﷺ hoisted Aisha anha on his shoulders to watch the celebration. So the idea there is that, no, it's encouraged, that this concept of culture is encouraged, even during the times of the Prophet ﷺ. And that, that it is our, it's absolutely vital and very important for us as North American Muslims to inject ourselves into the social fabric, into the social context of what is America and Canada. Even the stories of Ibn Battuta were mentioned, about how he traveled, and wherever he went, he saw buildings that were localized. So meaning that the masjids looked like buildings that were within that cultural context of whatever country he was in. Whether it was India or in China, he saw that the masjids were just like the buildings that were around him, and that they weren't something foreign and something different. And so how to cultivate the culture in North America, and so what Dr. Umar is suggesting here is to say, look, we need to take what is established, all the good that is established in these countries, and there's tremendous good around us every day. And we need to take that and add to it, and try to enhance it, and make it grow more than what it is today. We need to move out of these mindsets of having jobs where we're engineers, doctors, and lawyers only, to going into the arts. We need to have more literature. We need to not only have these buildings, we've built a lot of buildings, but we need to ingest ourselves into the arts with artists, with writings, with poetry, with comedians even, and these are the kinds of things that are going to grow that culture that's around us. And so that, hopefully, I know I didn't do any justice to the article itself, but I hope that gives some idea of the article, inshallah.
We Okay, so we're going to go over to City Rada. Dr. Umar suggested that while we read this paper, we also read alongside it maxim number 5 in next week's paper, Living Islam with Purpose. So I'm going to hand over to City Rada, who's going to summarize that for us, inshallah.
So, maxim 5, custom has the weight of law. This is the theme of the paper, Islam and the Cultural Imperative. And in it, Dr. Umar demonstrates, I think, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that Islam is not culturally predatory, and that in fact it teaches Muslims to look upon all cultural heritages with an open mind, especially those where they live and to which they belong. An example, obviously, the hadith of the Ethiopian converts that the brother just gave us. But even more importantly is the Quranic verse, except for people what comes naturally for them, command what is good by custom, and turn away from the ignorant without responding in kind. This demonstrates the Prophet's attitude towards ethnic and cultural identity. And it provides an example of his commitment to not destroying the indigenous culture and subcultures of pre-Islamic Arabia, but in living in harmony with them. An example is the Prophet's use of the 7 dialectical variations of Arabic, which in itself was not a necessity, but a respectful gesture towards the Arabian tribes. The Prophet's attitude towards the cultural norms of the Arab tribes and other ethnic groups constitutes a major precedent and a basic standard of Islamic law. Because of his broad endorsement of cultural diversity and cultural conventions, and the fact that he did not alter them except when necessary, Islamic scholars regard our religion's openness towards other cultures as being essential to the Prophet's Sunnah. This position, however, is in sharp contrast with certain Muslims of today who mistakenly regard the Sunnah as being narrowly defined to certain details of dress and personal behavior, and they substitute these elements for culture. Yet, Islam's rich legal theory regards sound cultural norms as constituting an independent and authoritative source of Islamic law. According to the renowned Hanafi jurist, for example, we have the saying, "Whatever is established by good custom is equally well established by sound legal proof." The Maliki school holds a similar opinion. According to Al-Tusuli, it is obligatory to let people follow their customs, usages, and general aspirations in life. To hand down rulings in opposition to them is gross deviation and tyranny. Just to give you an idea of what our scholars thought. The word custom itself in Arabic, as used in this maxim, refers to acceptable cultural norms, which the jurists have defined as matters that are firmly established in practice and frequently repeated in people's lives and are acceptable to sound natures. The fact that jurists refer to sound natures is linked to the Islamic belief that human beings are all created with sound natures and that they have an intuitive knowledge of God, good and evil, benefit and harm. In a normative state, we adopt cultural norms that are suitable for ourselves and the particular circumstances, times, and places in which we live. From the perspective of Islamic law, then, the nature of indigenous cultures and subcultures is fundamentally linked to the well-being of the groups that have adopted them. And Muslim jurists regard Islam's endorsement of diverse cultural norms as an instance of its overriding commitment to acquiring benefits and protecting from harms. Islamic law recognizes that cultural conventions are fundamental to our identities and that they have a strong hold over people. This is embodied in the associated maxim, culture is nature. It is thus wiser to leave customs unchanged insofar as possible. When change is necessary, the process requires wise strategies and sufficient time to take hold. The Prophet's example sets the precedent, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He brought his companions, radiallahu anhum, into full compliance with Islamic norms gradually through a process that lasted more than 2 decades. Some Muslims cite the hadith, whoever imitates a people belongs to them. This hadith, according to Dr. Umar, and the majority of our scholars, actually condemns servile imitation, not healthy cultural interaction, which is necessary to living with others harmoniously and building understanding. An example is the indisputable fact that the Prophet himself often wore various items of clothing that were Byzantine or Yemeni in origin that had been given to him as gifts. So obviously the Prophet was not hasha, engaged in a servile imitation. Rather, I think he was setting us free from the bonds of servile imitation. We must recognize the culture of inhibition that some Muslims have grown up in, and that it causes them to have anxieties about which indigenous customs are acceptable and which is not. Custom has the weight of law, and thus cannot be invoked to repeal what is clearly obligatory and or prohibited by Islamic law. The law categorically repudiates detrimental and degenerate customs. At the same time, however, it takes an open-minded attitude towards customs in general, and when judging customs, prefers to err on the side of leniency and not rigidity, which is something that we often see today. This is related to the presumption of permissibility in all things, with the maxim, permissibility is the basic rule in customs. Thus, the burden of proof is on those who wish to repudiate a particular custom, not on those who affirm it. In borderline cases, Islamic law prefers to err on the side of lenience. The basic rule in customs is exemption, meaning that they are exempt from blame. Accommodation for indigenous cultures made it possible for Islam to lay its roots wherever it spread on the continents of Africa, Europe, and Asia. There, Muslims readily adopted and enriched local languages. They adopted solar and astral calendars to determine the seasons and the best times for planting and harvesting, all things that they learned from the indigenous groups with which they interacted. They developed distinctively Islamic styles of dress, some of which some current Muslims incorrectly call sunnah. These particular styles of dress, the thobe, for example, as Dr. Umar states in the paper, differed significantly from the dress of the Prophet and his companions. The cultural creativity of Muslims is evident through the use of drums alongside the sunnah of the adhan in Indonesia, and the creation of pools at the entrances of mosques, for example, to allow paddy workers to cleanse their feet through the simple act of walking, rather than an overbearing, repetitive reminder to constantly wash their feet. Muslims were ingenious in their creativity in adapting to those local situations. In traditional Muslim societies, creative adaptation of indigenous norms was prevalent and often more beneficial than the mere adoption of them. And one should not be content with just adopting good cultural norms. We should fill them with imagination and creativity to produce norms that are more beautiful and more beneficial than what existed before. Some current noteworthy achievements of our North American Muslims are to be found in the fields of poetry, comedy, fiction, and nonfiction, etc., etc., as Dr. Umar states in the paper. And Dr. Umar says that a major cultural challenge, for example, for North American Muslims, is the basic act of designing truly indigenous styles of mosques. He points that the Prophet's mosque, peace and blessings be upon him, did not have a dome or a minaret in his lifetime. Both of these architectural elements are a relatively late development. The only necessary architectural element in a mosque is that it have an area for prayer. Domes were created to allow for expansive prayer areas that were not taken up by pillars. In essence, they were a substitution, or a solution, rather, to the lack of iron and steel beams. Minarets were ideal for making the call to prayer, but they also served as beacons to distant travelers when bonfires were lit in them. Understanding how basic elements of Islamic architecture evolved should point us to the direction that Dr. Umar would like us to look, that it's really more about indigenous creativity that we're looking for. A mosque should fit in harmoniously with its environment. In Africa, China, and Andalusia, Muslims did not adopt domes or minarets in part because they did not suit their environments. A mosque building today requires creativity, artistic, and technical genius, and they should be inviting by today's standards, and yet readily identifiable as a sacred place. In touching upon this last maxim, Dr. Umar would like to point to the fact that a distinctive vision of Islam needs to be developed, and that this vision of Islam needs to constitute indigenous norms and acceptable cultural practices, and that it is actually the supreme obligation of our generation.
Thank you very much. Very good. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, thank you very much, and I really enjoy this format. One of the things I think that needs to be stressed is that our attitude towards the cultures of the people around us is, as the article says, an imperative. It is not just a good idea. Again, good culture has the weight of law. Al-'ada muhakkama. And this maxim is one of the 5 core maxims of Islamic law. We, inshallah, can talk about those next week. They're in the article, Living Islam with Purpose. But these 5 maxims of Islamic law are a matter of consensus among all Islamic scholars of law. Sunni and Shia, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali. And it is the consensus of our scholars that the whole law of Islam is based on these maxims. So good culture, wherever we go, must be honored. And this does not mean that Muslims are called on to assimilate. But what it does mean is that we create a beautiful culture where we are that is in harmony with the cultural norms, the good cultural norms of the land that we live in, so that they can assimilate. Good culture opens the door for the other because of the fact that it requires of them minimal change, and they can grow and grow and grow. But it also acknowledges the goodness of what they have. And the analysis of this in our great scholars is brilliant. Because when Indonesians, for example, develop particular aspects of their culture, such as the use of drums in the forest, which is one of the things that Sister Raula referred to, This was because of the fact that in the rainforests of Indonesia, like those of Central Africa or South America, the human voice does not go very far, but drums do. So they have these huge drums that they hang from their mosques sideways, and they call the prayer because that's a sunnah. They don't stop calling a prayer, but at the same time, after that or before it, they beat these drums. Boom, boom, boom. And this sends a signal, they're like talking drums. And it sends a signal in the forest that the place where the drum is empty, fill it. Because the drums have different messages. So they play the message that means, I am empty, fill me, which means come, congregate, there's an important meeting. And people can hear that drum for miles, they can't hear the adhan. So this was a cultural norm that was there before, and the Muslims there and in other countries as well adopted that. And their fuqaha praised them for that. They didn't say this is a bid'ah. Yes, it is an innovation, but it's a good one. You know, the word innovation refers to everything new in Islam. And it's well known that when the Prophet ﷺ condemns innovation in general, he is condemning forbidden innovation or blameworthy innovation. But there are obligatory innovations, such as compiling the Qur'an. That was an innovation. Did the Prophet ﷺ compile the Qur'an in his life? No. As long as he is alive on this earth, the revelation is still coming. After he passes, ﷺ, then the Caliph Abu Bakr, Allah be pleased with him, begins to think, like, how will we preserve this book? We have many hufaz, and the Prophet set the order of the Qur'an, but we don't have a book. We haven't written it down. And he said, I believe we should write it down. And Umar said, how can you do what the Messenger of God didn't do? And then Abu Bakr made it clear to him. And then Umar saw that we have to do this. The creation of the madrasa is an innovation. Especially the madrasa that was a university. Today we think of madrasas in the way that, we think of these children, rocking back and forth, being beaten by sticks. The traditional madrasa was a university. This is where our PhD comes from in the West. Read George Maqdisi. And also the freedom of scholarship and the thesis. All of that comes out of the madrasa, which is a relatively late innovation. The writing down of Arabic grammar. The creation of dictionaries. These are all innovations which are necessary, obligatory innovations. And you have other innovations like using the drum in Indonesia, which are recommendable innovations, not obligatory. Maybe some people would say they are. The people can't hear in the forest. But you have those, and you have innovations that are neutral, mubah. We live in a society that stresses individualism, so everyone here is dressed in a different way. Whereas if you have been in Canada years ago, you'd see that we all dress very similarly. We would all be wearing very similar coats and ties and hats. I remember when I went to Europe the first time when I was 15 years old. I went to the Black Forest to study, and all the women in the villages dress exactly the same way. They wear beautiful black dresses with red, decoration on their hats. They cover their hair. They had bonnets and so forth. It was really beautiful. And all the men in the village dress the same way. Traditional people often do that because it gives them identity. And one of the things stressed in the article is the fact that culture gives you identity. Culture goes to bat for you. And it's very important to understand what we mean by culture because, and this is explained inshallah in the article to the best that I was able to do it briefly, but culture is that whole nexus, of the way that we live. This hub right now is an amazing manifestation of culture. Look at the cameras, look at the pod, look at the online presentation, look at the brothers, look at how some of the brothers are dressed. All of this dress is good. Some of it's really sharp. Brothers dress the way they want to dress. Sisters are dressed beautifully as well. We can choose. It doesn't mean like we're going to dress like technocrats. I don't dress like that ever. I don't like to. I don't like corporations necessarily. I don't like corporate culture. And we can dress, I dress different ways according to the people that I'm talking to. So I'm here with you. This is my favorite dress. This is the way that the sheikhs dressed me for over 16 years. This is the way I'm comfortable. And also it does have different responses in the culture. I remember when I was in Spain in 1998, I was dressed like this with all white. And I was coming down in Rosales, I was coming down from the mountains. And when this Spanish grandmother there was there, she said, "Un santo de los montañas." And there's one of the saints of the mountains. I said, no, it's okay, I'm all right. She said, "Un santo de las montañas." And again, the turban is mentioned in the Bible 15 times. This is the dress of Aaron. This is the dress of the angels. This is the dress of Moses. But we should tie it nicely. We should learn how to tie it. But we're free people. I dress like this in Chicago when I went to. But if I'm going to certain places, it's like, again, dress in a way that does not, that opens the door. My wife, who's African American, she was interested in Islam when she was just a little girl. And she looked at a book on Islam. And this book, it showed an Indian or a Pakistani woman not covering her hair, but she had very long black hair. And probably she had it braided or something like that. And she's reading the Qur'an. And my wife said, "I can never be a Muslim." She's only 12 years old. She said, "I don't have hair like that." And again, it's like, well, why would you ever think that? But people are that way. So, if I go out to the sandhills of Nebraska, which is where I come from, I could dress like this too. Because some people there wouldn't bother them. They would be interested in it. But the thing is that you want to make it very clear to the people that, look, if you come into this religion, we will bring you in easily and you can dress the way that you like to dress. We're not going to make you begin to wear turbans and shawls and long dress and things like that. So again, culture goes to bat for you, and culture speaks to people so that we are closer to them. So we build bridges, and so that it is easier for them to assimilate. Again, this is the nature of our culture. We are the great assimilators of others. And one of the ways we do that is that we adopt beautiful cultural norms as an imperative. Not really as a choice. Again, we do it brilliantly. Cultural creativity. I was in India and most of the month of Ramadan. I was in southern India. And, I visited beautiful places in Andhra Pradesh, in Karnataka, it's called? Karnataka, yeah. And then I went to Kerala. And in Kerala, which is beautiful, Kerala is spectacular. And it's the coast of western India, and it's got maybe 44 big rivers coming out of the mountains, 2 monsoon seasons every year, trees, jungle everywhere, beautiful, and beautiful people, beautiful Muslims, and also Hindu-Muslim relations in Kerala were the best I ever saw. But you have in Kerala the oldest mosques in India. and Pakistan also. You have mosques there that go back to the age of the companions and the successors. Radiallahu anhum jami'an. And I had to see these mosques. Again, mosques are really instructive in our history. And I had to see what were the mosques that these Muslims built, most of whom are coming from the Yemen, because Kerala has a strong Yemeni connection. You can see it in the people. Some of the tribes there, like the Berries, they speak a language called Beri. They have lots of languages in southern. The Berries are beautiful people, and they say that their name comes from Bahri, but they were traders. They still are mostly traders, Bahris, they're sea traders. And they look like Turks and they look like Yemenis, and really industrious people. They're around Mangalore, the city of Mangalore, which is beautiful on the western coast. But, we went to these old mosques and, they are spectacular. They look nothing like you have imagined or seen, I imagine, in India or Pakistan. Because they don't belong to the Persianate Central Asian tradition, which is also beautiful. We talked about the Taj Mahal, for example. But these mosques are what we would call in Hindu-Buddhist tradition, cosmic mountains. They're sort of like cosmic mountains. The cosmic mountain in Indonesia is the first mosque in Indonesia, where they put up 4 big pillars, and then they have a first roof that ties into that. It's usually rectangular, and often they don't have walls because it's very hot in Indonesia, very humid. And then you have another roof and a third roof, and the third roof is closed. So that's called a cosmic mountain. They get that from the Hindu-Buddhist tradition, but it makes a beautiful mosque, and it is sacred space, recognizable stuff. The Indian mosques are sort of like that, but because it rains so much in Kerala, they close in the top floors. And they don't have just 3, they will have like 5 even. And then they have a room for scholars, they have a level for scholars, they have a level for students, they have a level for worshipers. And the mosques are beautiful. They fit in perfectly with southern India. And there's no cultural shock there at all. It's like an invitation, to the people of Kerala, to come, to visit. I mean, really beautiful. I could talk about that at length, but we won't do that. But again, this is the way that Muslims were traditionally. When they go into West Africa, they pull out the treasures of West Africa. As we noted, here, East Africa too, Swahili, you create the concept of Swahilidom, Swahili, speaking Bantu, speaking it well. And then Swahilidom means that you have adab, you have good, manners, courtesy, dignity, humility, and so forth. And then you have the guest, who is any Muslim who comes. Often they're coming from Arabia, from Yemen. And then you have the wenyeji, which is the people who belong, meaning the people who have become indigenous. Why? Because they speak Swahili. Swahili is a beautiful tongue. They have epic literature, that defines the way that Islam will work among Bantus. They have great poems like Harkali, which is a poem about Heraclius. It's the greatest epic. Swahili has epics. And it tells about Heraclius, the Roman emperor in the days of our blessed prophet, but actually the poem is not about the prophet and about the Byzantines. It's about the Swahili Muslims and the Portuguese. And it prepares the Bantus for the Portuguese onslaught, which was violent and terrible. But it prepares, and then also it answers questions that Bantus will have. That, if I become a Muslim, what about my tribe? What about my tribal affiliation? So all of that is answered in the poem. And, again, as we said, with the houses of West Africa, our stories in the West of Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox and Brer Bear, Those are West African animal tales that survived the transatlantic crossing, surprisingly. Because West Africans love stories about animals, about the jackal, the hyena, the lion, and so forth. Now, these animal tales in West Africa go back, it is believed, to the Neolithic, that is the New Stone Age at least, which is like 9,000 years. So they go back to the time, and because they're so old, they have in them cosmologies and other things. Sometimes they have in them shirk. So what did the houses do? The houses invented their own cultural hero, who is called Auta, the baby of the family. And the baby of the family, is always the object of jealousy and hatred. And people try to kill him or to deprive him of his legacy. And you know a movie like that, right? The Lion King. The Lion King, the little lion, is Auta. He's the baby of the family. And everything conspires against him. But because he's so good, and because God intervenes on his behalf, he wins out in the end. So they use Auta in their stories to correct things. And, to show that this is where Islam stands, because Auta is the Muslim cultural hero. This is brilliant. And our history is filled with things like that. So again, when we talk about cultural creation here, we're not talking about take it easy, rukhas, license, you can do whatever you want to do. You can hang out and everything. No, we don't mean that. We're talking about seriously creating a dynamic new culture, which takes in your roots, however beautiful they may be. If you've got Indian roots, be proud. If you've got Pakistani roots, be proud. If you've got Arab roots, be proud. If you've got East African roots, be proud. If you've got Somali roots, you be proud. And you can contribute all you want to. And then also Native Americans. Because the Native Americans have a rich tradition in this land and in the United States. And, again, if you begin to bring things from Native America into your culture, which you can do easily, because if you look at the way that Sequoyah, the great Cherokee chieftain, dressed, he dressed like I'm dressed right now. He wore turbans like this. Always what's behind that. And we can talk about that later. And you look at the rugs, you look at the dress of Sequoyah. If I were to come into this room dressed like Sequoyah, the great Cherokee chieftain, you would think I was a Muslim. Look at his leggings, look at the Cherokee women. They covered like, look at the Apaches. And the Spanish believed the Apaches were doing jihad in the 18th century. The Spanish discovered mosques everywhere they went in America. When Cortez goes into Mexico City, as many of you have heard, he said, I found muchas mezquitas, y teocallis, y muchas casas grandes. I found many mosques and many pagan temples and many big houses, beautiful houses. Pizarro, these other, the same thing. What is that legacy? You dig into it. We can bring it out. If you had Native American rugs here, you would think they were from Afghanistan. African Americans, the African heritages, Mexican Americans, Hispanic Americans, and also the whites. English speakers, French speakers, whatever they may be. We do what we want to do. We take from what we want to take, and we build something new and more beautiful. And something that when people see it, they say, I like this. Really, you go look at those mosques in southern India. If Muslims built mosques like that in southern India today, there would be probably no cultural conflict. They fit in perfectly. They have a cultural message. The Ottoman Empire, when it builds these beautiful mosques, which you see in Istanbul and Edirne and all these great Ottoman cities,
their mosques were consciously, as a matter of policy, based on the Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church. They adapt it, they change it, they make it more beautiful. The Seljuk Mosque was based on the Armenian Church. Compare. Go look and compare. The Andalusian Mosque, the North African Mosque, they were based on the Roman Basilica for a lot of really good historical reasons too. And they were based on Visigothic adaptations to that, like the Horseshoe Arch. The Chinese mosques, amazing. And again, as you know, we say in the article, this is something that our scholars say, that Islam is a crystal clear river. Its water is pure, its water is colorless, its water is sweet, its water gives light. And it takes on the color of the bedrock that it flows over. So if it flows over green rocks, it looks green. If it flows like the beautiful Niger River in the sands of the Sahara Desert, it looks sandy, but it's clean. The Niger is crystal clear, but it shows you the sand underneath it. You know, if it flows over black rocks, it looks black. If it flows over red rocks, it looks red. So when Islam is in China, it is Chinese. And it is Islam, Hanafi, Sunni, serious Islam. The Hanafis are very strict. The Chinese are very strict Hanafis. Very archaic Hanafis, in fact. They do things that other Hanafis don't even do. And I didn't know Hanafis did some of that. And I asked one of the great Hanafi scholars, Sheikh al-Hafid al-Amin in Chicago, he said, that's old Hanafi fiqh. You know, but they are Chinese. And you know, we went to China twice. We went there year before last. And you know, when the first time we had Muslim guides and non-Muslim guides. This time we had all non-Muslim guides. They had never been in mosques before. They're Chinese. When they come in the mosque, they were astounded because this is Chinese. It's so beautiful. It's the most beautiful mosque you've ever seen. Some of them, wallahi, you do not want to leave them. You walk through these gardens to get there. The gardens take out all your concerns because they're Zen gardens. And then you come to the mosque and you just want to pray. You never want to leave. Beautiful. But they come in and they see, you know, Qin Zhen Jiao, the religion of the real and the pure. And it's like, this sets off the Chinese mind. It's like, wait, these are meaningful words. The real means universal truth, principle. You know, then it will say also the natural religion from the foundation of heaven. The Chinese always do that. They've got all these beautiful statements about Islam around their mosque. This is the natural religion from the foundation of heaven, written in beautiful Chinese calligraphy. And it really affected them. You know, I was wearing a little hat from Bukhara, which I have with me here. I had a whole bunch of them. All of them I gave away except for this one. Bukharans make beautiful hats. And one of the nice things about Bukhara, it's one of the only places where I can find hats that are too big for my head. Bukharans must be really amazing. It's like, because usually I can't find a hat that fits me. They're like too small.
I think that one probably is going to City United.
Oh, really? Right.
I can't find a hat that fits.
He's probably Bukhari. He must have some Bukhari. You know, I mean, Imam al-Bukhari, all these great scholars, they come from there. But, you know, and so I even one of them, I put my Bukharan hat on his head. He was so happy. He said, take pictures of me, take pictures of me. You know, so this is really important. Another important thing in the article is the fact that we are not cultural predators. Islam is not culturally predatory and is not allowed to be that. And today we do have interpretations of Islam that are culturally predatory. And this is the reason, this is really important. And you know, what do we mean by that? One of the examples I give of a predatory, of a counterculture, a predatory culture, are the hidalgos of Spain.
This is a very interesting lesson, and you can read about it if you want to. You can read the great historian Americo Castro. Castro, like the ruler of Cuba, and Americo from America, Americo Castro. He's a Mexican, but he writes about Spanish history. He's a great historian. And then he writes about the Hidalgos. You can find out about that because Hidalgo culture grows up in the north of Spain in opposition to the power of Islam in Spain. And Islam was so powerful in Spain and Portugal, on land and sea, that it was not imaginable that it could ever be conquered. In the 8th century, the 9th century, the 10th century, into the 11th century, and even in the 11th century when the Crusaders, most of whom are Northern Europeans, by the way, when they begin to have their big victories, especially the victory of Toledo, that was the one that really breaks the back, because Toledo is essential strategically to the geopolitics of rule in Iberia. And when Toledo falls, then things begin to change. Although the Spanish knew that the Muslims could always take it back. So Hidalgo culture grows up over 800 years. And Hidalgo culture is a war culture. But the main thing about it is that at the heart of Hidalgo culture is that I am great. I have my identity because of who I am not because of who I am. So the culture is defined by negation of the other. And in Spain, it is the negation of the Jewish other and of the Muslim other. That I am proud. I don't have to do anything as Hidalgos won't work. They won't do anything a Muslim does. They will not. Muslims are the great workers of Spain. They're the farmers, they're the artisans, they're also the scholars. They do everything, but Hidalgos will not do anything that is typical of Muslims, especially after Muslims have been conquered. So after Muslims are conquered, then most of the ones left are going to be artisans and farmers. Hidalgos will not pick up a piece of paper off the floor. Hidalgos will never clean up garbage, ever. They are men of war. They will fight, and they know how to fight. They are men of war. They will be priests. They will be bureaucrats. They will be administrators. And they will be cattle ranchers. And cattle ranching comes out, all cowboy culture. The cowboy hat, everything, comes out of Muslim Spain. Comes out of the no man's land. Most of it is Berber, Muslim. And then the Castilians also take on their aspect of it. So cattle and sheep, that they'll deal with that. They won't do what Jews do. Jews were in banking, Jews were in pharmacies, things like that. They wouldn't do that. So, and this is really important. Now, also I should point out that like in the 1960s in the United States, we also had a revolutionary counterculture. The culture of the political and cultural movements of the 1960s in the United States are often called counterculture. They were a counterculture against the culture of the establishment, the dominant culture. But they were not a counterculture in the negative sense because they affirmed the other. And that's the main point. They affirm the other. Hidalgos reject the other. And therefore Hidalgo culture becomes genocidal. It will back the Inquisition in eliminating Jews and Muslims from Spain and eliminating Native Americans as well. And they don't even blink an eye. It's a very, very important thing to study in history, and it has deep and often painful meaning in Spain. And one of the great books about Hidalgos is Don Quixote de la Mancha. He is un hidalgo de la Mancha, And I have to put on my glasses here. Okay, so we'll do that. But this is very important, and inshallah,
The thing is that the counterculture of the 1960s in the United States was a counterculture not against other people, but against another culture, the dominant culture. And it affirmed the other, especially the African American other, the Native American other, the Hispanic other, the Vietnamese other. See, that's good. And this is the way we should be also. You know, that what we do culturally affirms the Canadian other, the French Canadian other, the English Canadian other, the Native American Canadian other, you know, whom you call the First Nations, and so forth. You know, and we are affirming the other, not denying the other. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, there are other issues that we can talk about if we have time. You know, for example, the issue of monoculture. Monoculture is the culture of corporations that is ruining the world today. And this is another reason why it's very important for us to create a human culture. You know, human beings are cultural animals. They cannot survive without culture. And monoculture creates this veneer of insipid culture that has no roots and creates bonsai people, like little plants with their roots cut off. That's very dangerous. Consumers, they live through consumption, and you know, they can be, I mean, you know, they're also fed cognitive frames and so forth. You know, we have to be aware of that. And then another thing that we might talk about is also how we conceive of America. And I mean by that, America as the two continents of North America and Central America. This is very important because this, the cultures of the Americas among Native Americans before the Europeans came, and the Muslims did come here long before the Europeans, other Europeans, they were Europeans, Andalusians and Africans. And we have clear evidence of that. And again, you know, the Spanish are finding Muslims everywhere. You know, they're reporting that. You can read it in the historical text. It's just historians don't believe it's true. They say this is Don Quixote, you know, he's charging windmills. He thinks they're giants. It's not true. And you know, the Duchess of Medina Sidonia, who's one of the greatest women, she has the whole archives of the Armada. And she wrote a great book about Muslims in America, you know, before that, based on the Spanish Armada archives. You know, she said Cortez, the conqueror, cannot tell the difference between a mosque and a pagan temple. She said, who would believe that? You know, so again, you know, but you know, America was one cultural unity, and America is still one cultural unity. And the nation states break that up. But you know, Canada, the United States, Mexico, they have lots of common cultural roots. And it's important for us to bring that to life in our culture. The Caribbean, what is the area of America where you have first effective settlement of Europeans? First effective settlement is very important. You know, Quebec, the first effective settlement is of course French. So it remains essentially French to this day, even though you have lots of English speakers. And the first effective settlement of Ontario by English speakers is United Empire Loyalists from what had become the United States. Very important. People who didn't believe the revolution was legal, and it was not legal. It was an attempt to take empire from Great Britain and to create a new empire. That's what a lot of the Loyalists knew. They didn't buy Jefferson's line. You know, so this is there at the heart of English Canada, even though many English speakers in Canada don't have any ties to the Loyalists. They come later, they come from England or Scotland or whatever for their own reasons, or France or Germany. So that's also very important. And again, we want to create a dynamic culture that gives life to people and that is beautiful and attractive. And this is not just about the way you dress or whether you use a fork or a spoon or a knife. This is about big things, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And let's let the brothers ask their questions and the sister as well.
We're going to move over to the questions now.
The first,
If we could keep the questions as kind of brief as possible to make sure we get through as many of them as we can. That would be great. So.
I apologize in advance for my shaky voice. It's
Yeah,
the
raise the
nervousness and the coldness in the room, so.
Okay. But if you could just raise the microphone a little bit.
Inshallah. As I began to read the article, on the first page, the first question that came to mind after reading this quote, sustained cultural relevance to distinct peoples, diverse places, and different times underlay Islam's long success as a global civilization. And as I read that, what came to mind was other Abrahamic religions such as Judaism and Christianity. And I thought to myself, Christianity is pretty universal. So what is so inherently unique about Islam that different cultures all over the world have been able to embrace it and integrate it into their lives? For example, you don't see too many Chinese Jews. Why is that? You don't see another rare combination of ethnicity and religion like that. So what is it about Islam inherently that makes it so unique? And
well, there are Chinese Jews. There are Chinese Jews. They're not as numerous as the Muslims. The Muslims are very numerous. China was very well received. It received Muslims and Islam, very receptively. I don't know enough about Judaism or Christianity to answer that intelligently. But one of the things that does come to mind to me, and I hope this wouldn't be offensive to a Christian or a Jew, is the fact that especially when Christianity comes to the Americas, and often when it came to other places, it was not favorable to other cultures at all. And especially for Native Americans and for Africans, it dislodged a culture. And this has always been a problem, that in the colonial period also, when Christianity goes into colonial lands under the French or the English, often its whole purpose is to make them Western, to bring them into Western culture as subordinates. And again, was Islam in the Americas before Columbus? I believe on the basis of his sound historical evidence that it was. If it was, one of the things that we would expect is that it was in harmony with Native Americans. Because again, this is its pattern, and especially if the Mandingos of West Africa are one of the main sources. They crossed the Atlantic in 1312 with 2,400 boats, and we have of warriors, probably for gold. Gold was probably the main incentive bringing Muslims to the New World. The Muslims, as you heard before, of Java in 1500 already possess an atlas of the world that has the coast of Brazil exact. And as Fuad Sezgin, the great Muslim intellectual historian and cartographer and historian of science, has shown that a map like that cannot be put together by one or two trips. It takes generations of trips. So again, if the Muslims were here, then they would have probably come into the Native American tribes without dislodging Native American culture. And there are Cherokee Muslims, I know some, who say that this was the reality in the Cherokees. One brother that I know, his grandmother was from the Wolf tribe of the Cherokees, which is the shaman tribes. They're the ones with the spiritual seekers. And he said that his grandmother told him, and I trust him to be speaking the truth, that Islam was in the Cherokees, but they wouldn't tell white people. And whenever white people asked about the religion, they give them the old Cherokee religion. In any case, Islam is able to preserve cultures. When you go to West Africa, it's amazing. The Wolofs are Wolofs, and they preserve Wolof language and culture, even though the Mandingos were the rulers, powerful rulers.
and wise rulers, and never defeated. The Mandingos have never been defeated. And one of the great things about the Mandingos, maybe we can talk about that sometimes, is the trading village. I refer to it in Islam in the Cultural Imperative. The Mandingos create trading villages. This is really useful for us today. But they don't make Wolofs or Sereya or Jola or other tribes, Fulanis, become Mandingas. They don't do that. So, and in West Africa and perhaps in other parts of Africa, I know West Africa better, you have this amazing culture of translation. Because so many languages exist side by side. Anyway, that's the best I can do. Sorry.
Relay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Rizwan. I'm a student of Islamic philosophy at McGill. I'm also a student of fiqh jurisprudence here at Seekers Hub with Sheikh Faraz and some of you probably. I'm really glad to see some familiar faces and new faces as well. One of the major points, one of the major things I took from your essay, Dr. Umar, is that Islam and culture are not mutually exclusive. The thoughtful, clear, and accessible way you argue against cultural phobia and martial tools indigenous to our Muslim intellectual tradition has a lot of resonance with me. And in my community work with Muslim youth across Canada, I found a lot of practical benefit. So, Jazakallah khair. God bless you for writing this and being here with us tonight at the Hub to revisit it and think it out some more together. My first question has to do with the architecture of our current culture, and it picks up from the point that you were making about monoculture and talking about that a bit more. You've warned us that the monoculture is one of the most destructive features of the world we live in today, and one definition of a monoculture is a single homogeneous culture without diversity or dissension. And I'm wondering two things. One is if you could comment on whether you think that's a good working definition, or do you mean something else by monoculture? And further, when we talk about viable, wholesome, spiritually nurturing alternatives to the monoculture, some people propose building intentional communities, and I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So, what is your definition of monoculture?
The definition of monoculture I'm proposing, stealing from the internet actually. Of course, right? That's shameless, what we do. A single homogeneous culture without diversity or dissension.
Yeah, so a single homogeneous culture without diversity or dissension. And the Muslim who uses the word monoculture very convincingly and very powerfully is Sidi Abdul Hakim Murad, Abdul Hakim Winter. And so I got that word from him, as I get so much from him, I'm a pickpocket, very good at that. And I pick the brains of people like Sidi Abdul Hakim, Dr. Abdul Hakim Jackson. Where did I get cultural predatory? You think I would come up with that? No, that's Dr. Jackson. A lot of that stuff is Dr. Sherman Jackson. You can see his language going through everything I write. Dr. Jackson is brilliant. And every time I listen to him, taking notes, getting vocabulary. You have to have vocabulary, is really important. But the monoculture that we are speaking of, inshallah, I hope that I can add myself to Sidi Abdul Hakim, very wonderful company, is this modern corporate consumer culture based very much on markets, based very much on modern media, the internet and other things, rooted in the imperative of consumption, materialistic in the sense that it inspires people, mostly through advertisement, to believe that in consuming things, they will be happy. And it creates these ideal human figures who are hardly human at all, even though they may be actors and others that we love very much on the screen. But you have these idealized women, idealized men
who are showing eternal bliss because they've got the right perfume or they've got the right shoes on or whatever. I mean, you study this. Look in the airports. The airports are, really good examples of that. A lot of the airports, not all of them. But, it is a monoculture that does not give people deep roots. And it says it's homogeneous, and it is, what is the next words?
Homogeneous culture without diversity.
Without diversity. So in Islamic civilization, we have unity in diversity. And I don't know how we would say that in the monoculture. It's like we have denial of diversity in outward diversity. In other words, like, you're free. Do your thing. You can dance all night. You can go to any club you want. You can drink anything you want to drink. You can dress any way you want to dress. And you go to the airports and around the world today, and everybody's dressed differently. It's like they're so individualistic, and they are not individualistic at all. They're almost like clones. And they don't often think very deeply, although again, the Occupy movement, which began this year, that's really interesting. And it's really interesting because it is against corporate culture. And that is revolutionary in our time, because the corporations are the great danger. Some people believe, like Chris Hedges and others, that the United States ceased to be a democracy effectively as much as 40 years ago. Or maybe less, but it's totally in debt, and it's totally in debt to the corporations, and they call that inverted totalitarianism. And I don't believe that we are free in the United States anymore. I don't believe that our rights are protected there anymore. And I do believe that they're more protected in Canada. And I do believe that Canada is a much more functional democracy. And that might be naive. I know that the differences between the United States and Canada are not that radical, that you have problems here that are similar to the problems we have here in the United States. But nevertheless, in the United States, it's like, the corporations control to a level that you might find shocking. And you have a lot of that in Canada too, no question about it. Raw milk, for example, healthy for you. If it comes from a healthy, natural cow, the milk that comes from a cow, as long as you milk her in a hygienic way, clean bucket and everything, it is as clean as the milk from a mother's breast. Children do not get sick from nursing. They get sick from drinking Nestle's formula that is made in unclean bottles and with unclean water. But children who nurse, even though they live in poverty areas, they will be protected from a lot of diseases, and their mothers will also give them enzymes and other things that help them to flourish. Raw milk, raw cow's milk, is very good for you, unpasteurized. And it is clean and healthy if the cow is clean and healthy. The way that we treat cattle today, no. Some of these big dairy farms, you want that milk pasteurized, it'll probably kill you otherwise. But if you take a natural cow, that milk is medicine. And it is almost impossible to find. In the United States, I've never found it. I've looked for it from 1978. I would go, to dairy farms in Michigan, looking for raw milk. And they would say, like, we would love to sell it to you, but it is illegal. In Canada, it's also illegal because of the way that corporations control milk. Pasteurized milk is not the same thing. It's not good for you. Of course, if the milk is rotten coming out of sick cows, if it's not pasteurized, you probably get sick and die. But, we cannot, there's so much you cannot do. Joel Salatin has this book called he's a natural farmer. And permaculture is big stuff, by the way. Permaculture is great. But he says, why is everything I want to do illegal? When I wanted to You know, I wanted to sacrifice a sheep in the wintertime, for a particular reason. And so this brother who has Whole Earth Foods in Chicago, which is really good meat, like some of the meat you have here in Canada, it's halal, and the animals are properly treated. The meat tastes good because it is grass-fed beef. It is, and this is very important. Animals have rights. Animals have rights in Islam. And so we went down into Illinois, and we went to a farmer that we know who has like maybe 300 sheep, 500. He has a big flock, and he moves them around. He has beautiful fences, has a big Pyrenees dog that protects them from coyotes and things like that. And I got a beautiful sheep. And we could, but like I can't slaughter that sheep on his land, even though that would be the cleanest thing going, and that would also be good for the sheep, so that we would do it the proper way. And yet I've got to take him to a slaughtering house, an abattoir, and we found an organic one, but it's messy, it's filthy, and the cattle are being stunned, and that is really like, this is good. It's ugly, and then the way they slaughter the cattle is not acceptable by Islam. They begin to cut them after they're still shaking and everything, and it's like this poor sheep. I really felt bad. It's like, you have to see this, and we tried to clean it up and everything. We couldn't do it. Illegal. It's like, would you stop looking out for my well-being? Let me take care of myself. I'll be happy to get sick. Let me slaughter this sheep on the farm. We can do that. We can hang it up. It'll be clean. It'll be good. You can't do that. There's so much. Corporations. I mean, you talk about the meat industry. That is one of the greatest crimes of all. The way they treat cattle. The way they treat pigs. Pigs also have rights. We don't eat them, but they have rights as animals. They cannot be abused as animals either. Chickens have rights. Look at what they do to chickens. They never see the sun. The day that they are hatched, in the chicken house, the big, huge chicken house. If we talk like that in the United States, that is illegal. You have to be careful. Oprah Winfrey had a program about the meat industry, showing how these cattle are mistreated. You eat a hamburger from McDonald's, and even the hamburger you buy in the store, if it's coming out of the factories, it's got like 1,000 cows in it, because they slaughtered 1,000 cows, and all that meat is mixed together. If one of those cows has salmonella, you probably get infected hamburger. And she showed how, and then she said, after this, I don't think I will ever eat a hamburger again. And she went to court for how many years? Wow. Tyson, McDonald's, and this is not even to bring up genetically modified grains and things like that. This is horrendous. We have tomatoes on the shelves that have been genetically modified with pig DNA. I didn't make that up. I heard that from Hakim Archuleta, whom I trust in these things. And he said they do that because it gives it increased shelf life. It's like, again, the corporations have huge power. So the monoculture is essentially a corporate culture of consumption. When we went to China in 2010, I left the Chicago airport. You see the youths there, with their jeans with the big holes in them and things like that, and their T-shirts with these really sharp logos, like, I'm really independent, And I go to China and come into the Beijing airport. The same jeans, the same logos, the same T-shirts. And I said, this is monoculture. And again, the human being is a cultural animal. That it's a religious animal also, political animal also, speaking animal, linguistic animal also. But if you destroy the culture of a people, then you destroy the people. And monoculture creates people, this is Sheikh Hamza's expression, who are bonsai'd. And bonsai people are like Lilliputians, dwarfs, and they can be manipulated by the nation state easily. It is the greatest prelude to totalitarian control. And again, the totalitarian state today is very smart. It manipulates people in a way that they don't even know they're being manipulated. As Chris Hedges says, that when the fascists take over the United States, he believes they've almost done it already, he said they will wrap themselves in the American flag and they will raise the Constitution above their heads, even though they've defeated anything good that ever stood for. So again, it's like, yeah, you're free to say whatever you want, but basically the monoculture has made that impossible. It didn't make it illegal. Talk, you can talk. Who will listen? And again, this is this is really important. This is why also I think the way that Seekers Hub is using technology, online presentation, things that can be seen all over the world. This is really important because we're talking about a global engagement today. But one of the things in globalism, that is very important is to bring back local distinctions and local culture. Some people call that glocalism. It doesn't sound good to me. I don't know if I want to be local or whatever, but again, it's really important. You have a Canadian Muslim identity. And if you want an identity for Ontario, an identity for you, subcultures are really important. Subcultures are also important. It's not, and we're not talking about a monolithic culture. And intentional communities are something that I believe are very important. And that means that we begin to create little cultural worlds that are self-sustaining and that probably have in them permaculture. We should talk about permaculture. Permaculture is a modern science, basically practiced in many places, the United States, Oregon, Massachusetts, and Canada, England, but the leading thinkers and practitioners are mostly in Australia. Some of them are English who work in Australia. And permaculture is brilliant. It is to sustain the land, bring the land back to life. And, permaculture, it may not be enough for us, but, if we cultivate that and we bring it in, it begins to give us an economic base, which is also of great value for the future, because the oil crisis will come. 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, who knows? And when they go for shale, extracting oil from shale, this is going to be so polluting. It's just like, I just pray we can get through that. But, we should begin to build for the 22nd century. And this is also where culture comes in. Build communities. This sounds extremely idealistic, and it's something that would take us decades to do, I'm sure. But have a vision. Emerson, who did some good things, and Emerson did some things that are not so good. He's one of the people who taught Americans that whatever you think, it's right. If you conform, you're not a man. Be independent. It's like, this is true because this is what I think, And Emerson's also responsible for that. Some people say that the Tea Party is Emersonian. He taught them that. Whatever you think, doesn't have to be true, you don't have to prove anything. Whatever you think, whatever you say. And this is your opinion, this is my opinion. But, Emerson did say, hitch your wagon to the stars. Which is a beautiful poetic expression. But we have to have a vision. We have to have a vision, and our vision should be dynamic. And we have dynamic men and women in this community and south of the border. And, once we begin to do this and to really create culture, you've got culture right here. This is culture right here, But once you begin to do this, you unleash creativity. And then Canadians, they have creativity. French Canadians have creativity. And Native Americans have incredible creativity. You have creativity. So we begin to make something that is really new. And not just new, but something that is for the 22nd century. Like, this is the place that you want to live in. Not like we're going to go back to the 18th century and ride buggies. No. We're not going to do that. But, we create a community step by step. little by little, build on success, and inshallah, it's almost like Noah building his ark, remember? Noah's building the ark, and Noah's culture was a world culture, by the way. Noah went everywhere in the world because his people lived everywhere in the world. They could travel everywhere. They were big people, not like us. When they were drowned, they were also burned, as the Qur'an indicates. They were drowned in udkhilu naran. They were put in a fire. They were burned. No trace of them was left. But Noah goes everywhere, and then when Noah begins to build his ark, his big boat, they mock him like, you fool. We always said you were crazy. We always knew you were crazy. That's what they do, But then when the flood comes, he and those with him are the only survivors. And this is what we will do too, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Begin to build for many years ahead. And the longer that it takes for the oil crisis to come, the more merciful God has been to us. Because we don't have time. There is no time. Permaculture, if you got the city of Chicago to practice permaculture in Chicago, the whole city could feed itself. But it would take about 30 years. When we were in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia, in 2010, I was there, and we were in one of those big buildings downtown, the Mandarin Hotel downtown Kuala Lumpur, and this permaculturist was there. And he said, with permaculture, we could plant the whole side of the building with hanging gardens, all the balconies, the roof. And he said we could furnish all the restaurants in this hotel with everything they need all year long. Permaculture, really, you should take it seriously. It is beautiful. And it brings the land back to life. And I stop talking. Inshallah.
Okay, so Sayyidi, we have 40 minutes left. So inshallah, we'll open it up to the audience now, and we'll go into the audience questions, inshallah. So
You have to pick the hands.
well, Siri already sent a question
Okay,
already,
all right,
so
okay.
he's been picked and prepped.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you for the great article and a lot of great answers and information. When talking about developing a indigenous Muslim North American identity, how do we give direction to that at this time? Because a lot of us are going to be doing that, direction. We're going to be going in that direction that we sort of picked, I guess. It seems that at times that the development of culture is circumstantial. How can we direct this in a positive manner? And what is your view on what direction this should take?
Well, again, you're a good example of cultural creation. The way you live, the way you dress, that's the way you're happy with that. We don't impose anything on anybody. We are free people. I'm a free person. I can dress the way I want to. I'm not afraid to do that. And, but I think that also we have to have a broad perspective. And that means also that we've got to think of the society and of societal obligations in the broadest terms. For example, here at the Hub this last week, some of you were there, we had this presentation on homelessness. So that's a very positive thing to get involved in, taking care of the homeless. You see, and by that again we expand, but also it is our societal obligation, fard kifaya, in Islam to take care of all of our neighbors, not just Muslim neighbors. And so these things enable us to develop, a culture that is socially engaged, that is also conscious of the people around us. Like, what is a homeless person? What are they like? What is their background? Are they all drug addicts, for example? Are they all prostitutes? Maybe 10%, 20%. A lot of them are just CEOs, educated people, who have had shocking things happen to them in their lives, and they're out of work, and they can't pay their mortgages, and they're in the street. So it's really good for you to learn that. And again, we are a green deen. Animals have rights in Islam. Water has rights in Islam. Trees have rights in Islam. So we should be green.
We should protect animals. And we can do that. We spend millions and millions of dollars on meat. We eat too much meat, is a fact. For good health, you should eat meat once a week and fish once a week. That's all you need. To us, that sounds impossible. But we used to be like that. People in India today eat so much meat. I couldn't believe it. It's good, it tastes good, but it's not healthy for you. And they didn't used to eat like that because they couldn't buy the meat. But when they could buy the meat, they just went overboard. Used to be that people ate meat maybe once a month. They couldn't afford it. So the thing is, we need to protect animals. One of the ways we can do that is say that, look, if your animals are not treated properly, and if your animals are not slaughtered properly, we don't buy from you. We take our business somewhere else. That's all you have to do. And they will change. We spend millions of dollars on meat. So I think, have a broad perspective. And I would say also have a vision. And, this is a dynamic thing. Creativity. There are people here who can, just look at the people who put that on the wall. The dignity, reverence, serenity, love, and high aspiration. That's beautiful. And that's calligraphy. Okay, that's creativity. And look at this, you have the door over here, so they put the sign in front of it. That's beautiful. This is creativity. We have people like that. We can do lots of things. But again, what is the situation in the world right now? And the world is in crisis. It is an economic crisis. Some people say that what happened in the European Union these last few days, they substituted a new crisis for an old crisis. They still haven't solved the economic problem. The euro is still not out of the dark. And the United States is looking good now. The dollar's going up, especially with regard to the Canadian dollar. But that's because the euro is in trouble. Canadian economy is on much sounder principles. American economy is not. The United States economy is not. So there will be economic problems. That's not a prophecy, I don't know. But it's very likely. It's very likely. The next 3 years may be very rough and very dangerous. And then the oil, someday, it is going to peak. If it has not peaked already, we don't really know. Because oil is subsidized. So it does not behave according to market principles. So again, we want to begin to build. I believe we should do this. And I believe that we should do it as fast as we can. We need to have pilot communities. I think Canada is a good place to do it. We have to learn. It takes time. But we need to begin to create alternative communities that are dovetailed with the society, not alien to the society. You can have them in the inner city. You could bring the inner city to life, especially the inner cities of Detroit, Flint, Michigan, and the suburbs, and in the wilds, in the country, in the sandhills of Nebraska. I'd love to see that. That's where I come from. We could bring back the buffalo. We could bring back the animal. Really, I'm telling you the truth, we could. When I was in the sandhills the last time, I went to Wounded Knee. That's Sioux territory. That's Lakota Sioux. Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull. And I took my daughter and my granddaughter to visit Wounded Knee. And that's just in South Dakota, just above the sandhills of Nebraska. And the day we came back, we were really moved at Wounded Knee. That's the last great massacre of Native Americans in America. And I met a man named Little Moon, whose grandmother had been there in the massacre, and she told me how it happened and everything. Really, I was furious. But when I came back, we came into the sandhills of Nebraska, and it was, shuruk of the sun. Sun is coming, and the sun's coming from the east. And we looked out our window. There was this huge black buffalo bull standing by himself on a hill and shining like gold in the sun. And I just felt like that's not a bad sign. That's not a bad sign. I'm glad I went to Wounded Knee. That's not Sitting Bull, that's Standing Bull. But it's like we can bring that back with electric fences, things like that, because the bison have to be moved. wolves would do that in the past. We may not want to have a flock of, a pack of wolves. But, you can use electric fences with solar energy, because you've got to keep the buffalo moving. We can have the gazelles, and we can have Scottish cattle. Because again, permaculture studies these things. Like, you want to have cattle that you don't have to bring in the winter. So these are things we can do, but we think about what the world will be like when there's no oil. And when we finally learn that we've got to stop polluting. We could, like in a place like the Sand Hills of Nebraska, you could get, the source of the Little Platte River, the Little Loup River. And these, you could buy, the land is cheap. And you could then have all the water on your land be pure. Because in Islamic law, it has to be. You cannot pollute water. Sorry. You cannot. Forbidden in Islamic law. So we do that. We have clean water. What happens to it after that when it goes into the Missouri River? That's other people's business. There's so much we can do. So have a vision. Have a vision. Hitch your wagons to the star. And like we are building Noah's Ark. And people think we're crazy. A lot of people won't, because there are a lot of people in the United States and Canada, in Massachusetts, in Oregon, and other places, in England, who know that this is a looming crisis. And there's no time. So we begin to build something that, inshallah, and again, this is where the Mandingo village comes in, the trading village. We have, permacultural villages. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala.
So we have an online question. I find myself very much unsettled by a particular movement within the American Muslim community that seems to justify laxity in practicing fiqh in the name of a parochial Islam, such as relaxing the laws of gender interaction and proper dress, all in the name of creating an American Islam. What principles should we be aware of to avoid falling into this trap?
Well, I think that this is an anxiety that a lot of people have. That, okay, we're going to create a culture, that means we're going to start going to clubs, and, we're just going to do our thing, and, this is certainly not what I envision. And, we need to have a culture. Islamic culture is always based on universal principles, on prophetic principles and prophetic law. So that is not what I envision. And people interpret things their own way. And a lot of people have anxieties about culture. They have anxieties about where are we going to go with this? What are we going to do? But again, I would say that what you have right now in front of us, this is a beautiful culture. And we just let it grow. We nurture it, and we add to that. Zaytuna has a beautiful culture. Leaf collected in California has a beautiful culture. So we add to that, but again, we add to it by expanding the vision. That we have missions. And these are not missions to be cool or to hang out, or anything like that. These are missions, to be just to all people, just to all genders. We need to empower women. We need to have women scholars, for example. This is part of our tradition. But it also means that, we are concerned about the weak, the poor, and the oppressed, about the planet, about animals, about water, about plants, and things like that. And again, as I say in the article, this is an issue of integrity. I trust you, and I hope that you can trust me. And, you can expect in the United States and Canada that there are already lots of expressions of Islam. Some of them are countercultural. Some of them are creating cultures that will be historical fossils if they succeed. In other words, they'll be able to have their little community somewhere in Chicago or somewhere maybe in the mountains of North Carolina, and they will live their way and nobody will bother them, but they are a historical fossil. In other words, they will not be able to affect the society at large, and they will not be able to solve any major problems at all. They just keep themselves alive as Muslims and try to keep their children alive as Muslims. And that's not my vision. My vision is to create a culture that has values and truth and theology and deep understanding of reality and prophetic law, and that is dynamic, that is able to reach out to the society and talk to it and engage it, and then help to begin solving these huge problems that we face, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala.
We do have a question from a sister in the audience, but she won't ask it, so she's texted it to me instead. So, and I've been texting her furiously saying, please ask it, but she won't. So, could you give advice to Muslim converts in dealing with Christmas, as many family practices have essentially become family cultural traditions without much religious significance? A lot of convert Muslims are extremely hesitant about having their children participate in Christmas morning. Please advise.
Maybe I shouldn't do that. We are free to disagree, and especially when we come to Islamic law, we have different positions on different things. And I believe in the Mawlid, and I celebrate the birth of the most noble prophet who was ever born. And Surah Maryam is a Mawlid of Jesus Christ. And the Qur'an has Mawlids of Moses and of John the Baptist and of Mary. The Qur'an celebrates the birth of Mary. It celebrates the birth of John the Baptist. It celebrates the birth of Jesus. It tells us about miracles that were there. It tells us about the miraculous birth and early life of Moses. And with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he celebrated his birthday by fasting on every Monday because he was born on a Monday. And the Sahaba recited poetry to him. So when my mother and father were alive, may God have mercy on them, and I hope and pray they died good deaths. I believe they did. Whenever they had Christmas, I was there. And we had a wonderful time. And, they would tell me, you lead the prayer. And we would talk about Jesus, and we would talk about the greatness of Jesus. And they were happy. They were so happy. And we would eat their Christmas dinner. But it was halal. I would bring the food. I'd bring the meat, from Chicago. Whole earth, organically slaughtered. It wasn't called whole earth then. It was called Takwa Eco. And, and then my mother would cook the turkey or whatever it was. And they were happy. And again, it's like, culture, you've got to be smart, because it's like, I didn't go with them to church. I didn't kneel down and pray at an altar, but they respected me. And for that reason also, it's like, you lead the prayer. And even if they did pray, they would say a prayer that I could accept. So like in Christian families, if the Christmas dinner is a big thing. And you can hurt them deeply by not showing up. And all your brothers and sisters come, your cousins come, your uncles and aunts. So for me, that was my approach. And I believe that was authentic for me to do. Again, like we're a community that, like, when Halloween comes, you know what the khutbah is going to be about. I mean, you let your child go out to get candy on Halloween, you better take your shahada again. So our community, again, we've got these, you say Halloween, Christmas. Now, we can ask our scholars. And again, in Islam, we have differences of opinion, so we respect those. But that's my opinion. That was my stance with my family, and my family appreciated that very much. If I was wrong, may Allah show me that I was wrong and let me follow what is right. You have to pick people.
We have a brother at the back, right at the back.
I have two questions and an answer for the sister. I realized that you really can't defend the honor and dignity of anyone if you don't celebrate. And a lot of Wahhabis, they don't celebrate the Prophet's birthday. So.
Again, al-'ada muhakkama, and custom has the weight of law. The problem with these things is they have this religious aspect in them, so that people want to make distinctions between whether they are just accommodating people or also accommodating their beliefs. May Allah guide us to what is best and what is right.
The question is, in reading your two papers, I found that in the first paper alludes to how to solve problems in this paper, and that within us we're created in God's image. Those 99 qualities of God are within us. It's our birthright to pull them out, cut them off, so God's light will splendor them. And with that, we can navigate our way through these rational differences we have in cross-cultural interpretation and differences. So maybe we've lost touch with being a virtuous being, a virtuous community, so that we could sort of self-navigate through objective and subjective truths within culture.
Do you hear what he said?
So the question was,
Did you hear the question?
I did. So it is our birthright. So the first paper addresses the
Can
second.
I use the mic? I don't want to do the occupied thing.
Why don't you take that question? Sheikh Faraz has to answer this question, right? Yes.
I was going to make a comment.
Please make a comment. Please make a comment.
Brother's getting word his question is going to get repeated.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the question, as I understood it, was the first paper, One God, Many Names, provides some level of an answer to the problems posed in the second. It is our birthright to pull out the attributes of Allah, the 99 attributes of Allah that are within us, and so using those we could navigate the problem that culture and the cultural sort of difficulties throw up. So maybe the issue is that we have lost the art of being a virtuous community.
When we, in Islam and the cultural imperative, and also in living Islam with purpose, we approach that theological issue from the standpoint of law. And our fuqaha believed that human beings have the ability to discern what is beneficial for them and what is harmful. And, that most good cultural conventions that are developed in countries are developed because of human awareness of what is beneficial and harmful. That sounds unintelligible to some Muslims who believe that you can't think, you can't understand. You've got to have a hadith for everything. You've got to be told everything. You have a fitrah that has knowledge of good and evil and truth. And so this is why our fuqaha said, because the Islamic law protects the maslahah. It is always looking for the general benefit. And it's always warding against mafsada, harm. And one of the greatest precepts in Islamic law, is that dar'ul mafasid muqaddamun ala jalb al-masalih. That the repelling of harm shall take priority over the bringing of good. Meaning that, if you have a decision to make, if that decision is likely to bring harm, and that harm is equal to or greater than the good it is likely to bring, you cannot do it. When you say that something is beneficial, of course it has to agree with the precepts and principles of prophetic law. It cannot contradict them. But we can't have a culture of drinking wine in France because they like wine. But when we make a decision and we seek the maslahah, we seek the benefit, and we know that there are potential harms, and this would pertain also to cultural creation. and a lot of the issues that are raised, that if the harms are equal to or greater than the benefits, then we don't do it. So the benefits have to outweigh the harms. But human beings, these cultures, like the way that people build their houses in cold climates. I was this year in Russia, and we visited the Tatars, the Golden Horde, of the Volga River. Beautiful people. And their mosques, are beautiful mosques that are, built. They look like Russian Orthodox churches, not surprising. This is what Muslims do. But, they're really built for, a climate where the weather gets 30 below, 40 below. So they have 3 doors. You have to come through 3 doors. And, then, you have no doors where the actual mosque area is because it's cold. You have drafts. And then in the mosque, they have beautiful wood. Incredible, beautiful woodwork. And then they've got plants everywhere. Because in the wintertime, you want to see some green plants. So, the issue of seeking good is really important. And our scholars say that most good cultural conventions, stoplights, for example, they are because of benefits in the society. And so therefore, this is one of the reasons why we acknowledge them. Now, human beings are oriented inwardly to know good. And the brother talked about the 99 names. That's a beautiful theological issue. One of the realities of the 99 names is, that when you bring our brothers and sisters to life, and you have a dynamic community, you will release tremendous creativity. That's one of the workings of the 99 names. That this human being now becomes creative. And look at the Muslim cultures of the past. Look how beautiful they were. And we want the same thing in our time, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. May Allah give us tawfiq. And I believe that the community here is on the right path. That's my belief.
This hadith came to mind regarding what you're saying, that when the Prophet ﷺ came as the messenger of God, and the Qur'an describes that time, that ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس, that corruption is manifest on the lands and in the seas by what the hands of men have wrought. But yet when the beloved Messenger ﷺ defined his own mission, he defined it in positive terms, that إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, that I was only sent to perfect noble character, that he saw the good, the virtue, the nobility, the potential for good that was in his society. And he saw his message as an affirmative message that perfected and facilitated the potential of his people. And I think that's part of the religious basis of what what you're mentioning. Yeah, this two other things that occurred was 2 statements by a great Hanafi jurist, Abu Hassan al-Kirki. One where he said that, and it's almost exactly what you mentioned, that people only establish norms and practices because of masalih, because of benefits that they perceive in them. And he said, so therefore, فَحَمْلُ النَّاسِ عَلَى خِلَافِ مَا تَعْرَفُوهُ حَرَجٌ. So forcing people to do that which goes against their norms is a type of imposition of difficulty. And the general principle in our deen is al-haraju madfu', that difficulty is lifted, so that any time one would have an inclination to change the way things are, one would be disinclined to do so, because the way things are only because people perceive benefit there, and that's what the Sharia has come to promote, unless that norm that they have is in fact detrimental.
That's very beautiful, mashallah, and that does raise something, that ظهر الفساد, that the corruption has appeared on the face of the earth, and on the seas, because of what the hands of human beings have earned. And this brings another issue too, which we could just mention, perhaps in passing, because time is about to run out. I hope everybody gets to ask their questions. But this is also that culture has always got to be watched. And therefore, like as we develop culture, we do have to watch it. It's not like just anything goes. And also in the culture of Muslims right here in Canada and the United States today, there are things that we need to be aware of, and we need to do something about, and we need to create cultural mechanisms to keep from occurring, like abuse. We talked about domestic violence, dysfunctional marriages, and then even in our Quranic schools, in tahfidh, you have the abuse of boys and girls. Whether you know it or not, it is there. That does happen. So, and often it's impossible to change. I know because I know of people who have been hurt by that. And I know it basically because I have friends who are counselors, and they learn that. So it's like, and the big thing is that when this boy is abused, or this girl is abused, there's nothing they can do, because you will hurt, the reputation of this scholar or of this institution. So what are we going to do about that? You see, we've got to clean our act up, because we also have a culture right now where you do not criticize certain people and you do not criticize certain institutions, and there are things that go on there that should not. So, and we have lots of things in our families that cannot be spoken. We've got ancestral rape. Okay, that's a fact. It's not in most families, but it does occur. And so what do? We just turn a blind eye to that? Because a lot of our cultures are that way. That, no, this doesn't happen to us. It does happen to us. So again, when we create a culture, we've got to also be aware of things like that. We don't want abuse in our culture. We don't want the abuse of boys or girls or wives or husbands, or in-laws or anything like that. And we do have to create a culture of marriage, in which marriage is beautiful and marriage is functional. In the United States and in Canada and in Great Britain and in much of the Muslim world, you have such a problem with dysfunctional marriage. I've heard cases after cases after cases, and of abuse of men and women, not just of men, and that is really destructive. So again, when we talk about culture, it's not like, everything in culture goes. Absolutely not. And it's not like everything we do is good too. We've got racism in our culture. You try, an Indian marries a Pakistani, one of them's going to get kicked out of the community. I know a sister, that's a Bangladeshi doctor, and a Pakistani brother in England wanted to marry her. She's in England too. His family made it clear to him that if he married this Bangladeshi, he's out of the family. And she's a good Muslim and a beautiful woman. And she would have been such a wonderful thing for him. And he loved her. But his mother made it clear that you will never talk to me again. What is this? Paganism. Really? Backwardness. You're an Afghan, you will marry an Afghan. You're a Pashto, you will marry a Pashto. Look, these things, really, we don't have room for that. We don't have room for that. So also there are serious issues here that, in the culture of our community, we must facilitate sound marriage. Counseling too. Because we live in a culture, of pornography. We live in a culture of a film industry who's going to teach you how to love and how to relate to a woman, and that's not the way it works. Okay? So, we need counseling. Monoculture, again, people don't even know how to love each other. People don't even know, and in this society, for all of its sexual promiscuity,
Nobody wants a serious relationship. All the relationships usually are casual, and that's nothing at all, and really, so again, we have a lot of serious things to do. And inshallah, may Allah make this beautiful, may Allah make this dynamic, may Allah bless all the marriages here, may Allah make the marriages here exemplary marriages. But, and again, al-darar yuzal, another maxim of the law that everybody agreed on, one of the 5 maxims, harm will be removed. The woman is being beaten in her house, that will be changed. You don't tell her sister, go back and be beaten again. And that's what some of the imams tell people. They will. They actually tell her, that's you'll be close to Allah. You go back and let that husband beat you again and again. Never. Never. She has a right, to be protected. The community, and that's one in the Maliki law, when they talk about that, they also point out that, like, in certain countries like the Sudan, you touch your wife and you'll be lucky to live another week. Because her family will come down on you. You don't touch women. You don't beat women. And we have a culture with, some of the Guyanese, Allah bless them, they knock their wives out. And this is not funny. And when you abuse your wife, you abuse your children. And sometimes wives abuse husbands as well. It goes both ways. The husband needs affection. The wife needs to be loved. This has got to be there. We have to facilitate that, and we need counseling, really. We don't, human beings are clueless. We are cultural animals, and especially with the modern culture, no one knows, very few people know how to be married, how to be intimate, how to live with the other gender. You saw it in the movies, it doesn't work like that. And if, God forbid, you saw it in pornography, and pornography leads to the totalitarian state. You read Chris Hedges about that. And pornography leads, to impotence. It leads to impotence for a lot of reasons. So like, if this is what we're taking in, how are you going to ever have a normal relationship? So again, we've got a lot of work to do. And inshallah, may Allah give us the ability to do that. If we can make marriages work in this society, and may all of your marriages be beautiful. And I know a lot of them are. But then you get to get a healthy society. You look at children in this society, who have grown up here and who have a compass, a moral compass about Islam. And there are exceptions to that. But I think that you will find, that's my finding, that usually that means the mother and the father have a very positive relationship. And it doesn't just mean that they don't argue in front of the children. It means that they actually respect each other. And hopefully they love each other. And then the children come out really good. The children come out strong. Just as we said before, you want the children to be strong? If we love each other and we are in harmony with each other in this community, then our children will be proud to be what we are. Even though we're a small minority. And marriage is really important like that. You abuse your wife, you have abused your children. My mother and my father are 2 streams that come together in my heart. And they come together because my father loved my mother and honored my mother. And my mother honored my father and loved him. So I got the best of my father and the best of my mother. That's just speaking the truth by the grace of God. And some people don't have that blessing and they still come out all right. Some people just have their mother and they still come out all right. But we've got some serious stuff to do here too. And inshallah, Allah will give us guidance and protect us. Give us tawfiq. Ameen.
So it's 9:30, which means that we're going to have to bring the session to a close. And I could sit here for the next 2 hours, but unfortunately We can't, because Sheikh Faraz will kill me. SubhanAllah, it's been an absolutely incredible discussion. Alhamdulillah. I may just die for that comment anyways. You know, we've learned a huge amount.
I'm occupying the floor in protest.
We've learned a huge amount this evening. You know, cultural integration is not an nafsi process. It is done as an imperative for the benefit of the society around us, ourselves, and most of all, the faith of Islam. And the creation of cultural norms, cultural maxims, can prevent and challenge societal occurrences that are abhorrent to us, inshallah. But we're not talking about a license to do whatever you want to do. As Dr. Umar said, we're talking about seriously creating a dynamic new culture that takes in your roots. We build something beautiful that invites the other to feel that they too belong, inshallah. And we're talking about unity in diversity. So we're talking about a culture that's based on universal Islamic principles, and where we expand the vision and we have a mission not to be cool, but to be just to all people, to empower, to have concern about the weak, the poor, the oppressed, the earth, animals, and plants. And as Sheikh Faraz reminded us, the hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, coming to protect noble character, provides a beautiful means of guidance on how to navigate and how to provide direction to us to achieve that cultural imperative, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan to all of you for joining us. For everybody online, mashallah, we hit 60 attendance online as well. So it's been a very blessed evening this evening, mashallah. We will be continuing in conversation with Dr. Umar next Friday. So it will be Friday the 16th of December. But we're also very blessed, inshallah, to be joined by Imam Afroz Ali from Sydney. He is the founder and runs the Al-Ghazali Center and also Seekers Hub Sydney. So inshallah, he will be joining us next Friday in conversation. Please do read the final paper.
You mentioned the paper, right?
Yeah. So the final paper is online. It's downloadable from the Seekers Hub website. It's the Living Islam with Purpose paper. It is the longest paper of the three, so don't leave it to an hour before you come. Because, you know, I may not get a panelist to provide you with summaries next week, just because it's a test to make sure you've read it. And for the remainder of Dr. Umar's programs, please do keep continuing to check online. The updates and announcements of where he will be, inshallah, is all there, so you can continue to get that. And finally, you know, these evenings are very blessed, so please do continue to remember Seekers Hub and our teachers and all of those who are involved in your du'as. Dr. Umar's program would not be possible without a multitude of volunteers that have helped. And you know, they're behind the scenes, they don't come to the front, they don't get seen, but they are incredible in what they do. So we really should just remember them, inshallah, in our du'as when we make them. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضاه واجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما آمين آمين آمين. الفاتحة بسر القبول. الفاتحة.
Assalamu alaikum. There's just three things very quickly. One is that, alhamdulillah, there's a lot that we have coming up, inshallah, and at the next discussion we will be presenting some of what we have in mind for the upcoming year, and since Imam Afroz, who is one of our imams, he'll be here actually in person, not just in some virtual presence. He's like the Energizer Bunny. He takes a licking, but he keeps on ticking. He went through 2 rounds of cancer in the last 2 years, but he didn't
recite al-Fatiha for Sheikh Afroz, that Allah gives him a perfect cure, long life and good health. Al-Fatiha.
So, inshallah, the reason we've named this the Seekers Hub is that it's meant to be a place where people come together. And since we have the new year coming up, we really encourage you to consider getting involved in the team, and not just to volunteer, but if you have ideas, there's some project that you're really passionate about, and not just to suggest it, but to get involved in making it happen. You have some suggestions about what kind of educational programs, but other things. There's some service project, some particular thing that you're interested in, you'd like to see a space where it can become a reality. Do get involved, and we like to make this a place where people can feel that they can not just do things, but they can be a part of things, and where they can find a platform that facilitates the good that they want to engage in. So do consider that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and we will, in the next 10 days or so, while Imam Afroz is here, be having sort of like a town hall meeting as well. Dr. Banu doesn't know this, I'm pulling rank on her, to discuss some of the plans for 2012, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and we'll keep you updated on that. So Jazakallah khair to all of you for attending, for Dr. Umar for giving us this tremendous blessing of being with us for the whole month. A lot of you may not be able to come to all the programs, but Jazakallah khair to Sidi Nadir, who's been diligently putting up all the recordings and the videos online. You can find them through the Seekers Hub page itself, but you can also go to youtube.com/SeekersHub, and you can find the various lectures and lessons, and there's some incredible lessons there. So don't just like share it on Facebook and say, Alhamdulillah, I did my part, but actually listen to it attentively. One of the biggest lessons I always get from Dr. Omar is that it doesn't matter who's speaking, right, and how unworthy they may be, but he always takes notes. Right? He always takes notes. So learn from that. That even anything that's worth listening to is worth taking notes from as well.
We're still collecting money for the Feed Me campaign.
Okay, and since Sidi Nadir, the Feed Me campaign that Sidi Nadir is running, which is not the Feed Nadir, but rather, there's over 110,000 people in the Mississauga region that are, to use Nadir's favorite expression, food insecure, or in English, hungry. This is a serious reality, and if you supporting this is also part of building relationships with the wider community and engaging. Alhamdulillah, a lot of the Muslim youth groups and MSAs and number of community groups have been engaged. If you go on the Seekers Hub website to the Ansar page, which means helpers, there's a number of those groups that are listed, and this is one of the best ways of giving charity and encourage other people. Right, one of the ways you can multiply your own charities. Anytime you do the good, suggest that good to someone else, because you're not doing it for some ulterior motive, and whoever points to the good has the reward of those who act upon it. So this is something that you should consider supporting. Just go to the Seekers Hub page, Ansar, and you'll see the details.
And we're collecting cash in the front.
And there, you can just make a donation here, or you can make it through PayPal online as well. Wassalamu alaikum.
Ladies, I